Welcome to the next installment of String's Creative Alchemy Podcast, a series dedicated to exploring the worlds of multifaceted creators. Today I'm here with Steve Gooch, author, artist, Reiki master, and founder of 12 Seconds for Peace. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Cheryl.
Let's introduce everyone to the project 12 Seconds for Peace first before we talk about other aspects of your life.
Sure. Well, let me give you a bit of background on 12 Seconds and where this all sort of came from. My background is as an artist, so I tend to respond to the world around me and the things that I engage with from an artist's point of view. And I started to look at this site called 12 Seconds TV from an artist's perspective. Now, I'd come across 12 Seconds TV 2 or 3 years prior to the 12 Seconds for Peace project starting, simply because I'd written a book that came out about 3-4 years ago, and as part of that the marketing strategy for that book, I had to become familiar with a lot of the social networking sites like Facebook, MySpace, Twitter, etc. 12 Seconds TV was just another social networking site, and I guess a lot like Twitter, it's pretty much, just bubblegum that comes out there. This, meaningless stuff that people put out on that site. And I started to look at this and think this has got a lot of creative potential. I started to see this as a raw material in the same way that I'd view a piece of clay or a stone. I wanted to make something out of this, because it just seemed to me that whole idea of just having a 12-second video clip has got so much potential. It's got so many constraints, yet because it's got those constraints, it somehow seemed to suggest to me that there's enormous potential here for creating something that hadn't been done before. And it occurred to me that if I could get people from all around the world to submit a 12-second video on a theme, any theme, and then to knit those videos together, I could start to build up a really fascinating video collage around this particular theme, whatever it was going to be, and pulling in different cultures, different, ways of being, different societies, all contributing to that, multifaceted sort of kinetic collage that I wanted to build up. And I thought, well, peace is an issue that is close to my heart, and it's also something that I think a lot of people will automatically respond to. A lot of people, it's not everybody wants peace, or most people want peace, and it's something that I thought that a lot of people would engage with. So the initial concept was 12 Seconds for Peace, and I just wanted to see if it was possible to pull in these videos and make this kinetic collage from different cultures, different societies, from around the world. And at the same time, I thought, well, what's their motivation? How am I going to get these people to contribute a video? I'm going to have to use this to raise money for some good cause that's actually trying to do something to make the world a better place, for all of us. And so, that was really the mainspring of the idea. Let's get these videos in around the theme of peace and use that in some sort of creative context. Maybe get this work exhibited in an art gallery or screened up behind a band, maybe, and start pulling in funds that we could then give straight back out to some charitable cause that was actually doing some real good in the world. So it was all about being proactive for peace, really. And the whole creative thing was a part of that. This was an artwork, essentially, that I wanted to create. It hasn't been going for very long, but you've had a pretty good response just for initially putting it out there. Yeah. What are the parameters for people? Yeah, I mean, in technical terms, the only technical restriction on it is that it needs to be no more than 12 seconds in length, simply because it won't upload if it's any longer than that. But in terms of the theme itself, it's all pro-peace. It's not anti anything. I know a lot of people, maybe anti the Iraq war, or anti what's going on in Palestine, or anti this, anti that, pointing fingers at, big business may be the cause of war or whatever. And it's like, I understand all of these arguments, but we're not looking negatively at who's at fault here. We're looking positively at the fact that we all desire peace, and I don't care what side of that divide you're on, whether you're pro the Palestinians or pro the Israelis. I don't care. I want the Palestinians and the Israelis on this project saying, yeah, we want peace too. We want peace and we want peace. And, I want everybody to be pro peace on this.
The Dalai Lama had a comment on his Facebook, actually, that I wanted to read out loud because it has something to do with this, and see what your take of it is. He said, quote, "Peace does not mean no more conflict among humanity. Conflict is bound to happen. So in order to keep peace in spite of conflict, the only realistic method is the spirit of dialogue, respecting the other side and understanding their viewpoint. We need to try and solve problems in a spirit of brotherhood and sisterhood, in a spirit of reconciliation and compromise." I mean, it seems to me that is, this particular project is communicative in nature.
Yeah, it is.
Between many people.
Yeah.
Who have different views. It's like if you look at one person's submission, it's an entirely different view of peace than another person's.
Yeah.
Can you think of a couple different examples of that you've seen in some of the videos that have been submitted? Yeah,
I mean, there's a beautiful little video on there. It's probably one of my favorite ones that has been submitted so far by a Palestinian woman, Widyan Shart. And I remember having a conversation with her over the internet one evening prior to her submitting this video, and the bombs started dropping at that point while I was in that conversation with her, and she had to go. And the next day, late in the day, she submitted a video, and it's an amazing little video of her daughter talking about the fact that she was living in fear and needed to go and hug her mother because she was terrified of the bombs. But the message was all about, I want peace. It was not pointing the finger at anybody. It was about, I want to live in peace. I want to feel safe and secure. And it's that little video just on its own it just hits you right in the heart. Actually, it's it really grabs your emotions.
I know many people express peace in the videos that I've seen, because I've viewed just about all of them, I think, that I've had a chance to see.
Yeah.
Many of them are through nature. I mean, I've noticed that a lot of people, express through nature. One gentleman had the string of numbers coming down. Chris Koo, I think, had put in.
Okay, yeah.
That was an interesting digital representation. Everybody's, or string of letters, I think it was. Yeah. It's a very creative concept in that people can actually submit any way that they see a piece visually.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, for me, I have my own personal idea on what peace is, but I'm aware of the fact that that's just my opinion. Other people have their own spin on what peace is. For some, it's about becoming peaceful themselves. For others, it's about the absence of war in the country they're in, or it could be just living in a neighborhood where they don't feel threatened anymore, or being out in nature, just walking across fields and seeing trees and flowers and appreciating the beauty of nature. I mean, that for some is the definition of peace. So, it's all about people contributing a video on the theme of peace, but it's up to them. I want to know their definition of peace. I'm not giving them an outline of what peace is. I want to know what they feel that it is. But one thing that I have noticed with this project is that more and more it's becoming very apparent that there is a consensus, really, that peace is about what's going on inside personally. This is where peace starts. And you see this message coming through over and over again. It's all about, before the world will become peaceful, I personally need to become peaceful.
That's really interesting, because that means that through looking at a number of videos, you're getting a consensual picture of people and how they view the phenomena of peace in themselves and how that translates into the outer environment, which you would never have known had you not received these submissions that are sort of stacking up to that. Yeah. That's quite interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there's quite a spectrum of videos there covering all, so many different aspects of society and life in general. But if you look at the message that this collage is putting together, it's all pointing at the individual as being the source of peace. It's about me becoming a peaceful person. And when collectively we can become individual units of an expression of peace, then the world becomes a peaceful place.
Do you see yourself as a visionary then in some ways? I mean, you know how art can be created just off the spur of the moment, kind of a spontaneity.
Yeah.
Or it can actually be a vision, something that you foresee as reaching into the future or foresee as becoming something else than the point of creation. Was it like that?
Yeah, I guess so, to a degree. I mean, the whole thing, the whole way it was going to go and its future just tumbled into my head. It was like just this stream of information just fell into my head as soon as I decided that, yeah, I'm going to give this a shot, see if it'll work. Everything else it was like watching a movie, really, just knowing exactly what I'd got to do with it, where it needed to go, how it was going to unfold, its potential in certain ways. And it's so far gone exactly to plan. And, I think all I've got to do is just sit and watch this unfold, really. I think it's going to be a phenomenon. It's going to make a significant impact across the globe at some point.
What is the impact of it? I mean, we know that, we all get together and we're, united in the spirit of peace in ourselves by doing the video. But how does that actually impact the world? How would you see that impacts the world? Okay.
I mean, let's say, if we could go and sign a petition for peace, for instance, that's one way we could make our mark and put out our energy of intent for a more peaceful world. These videos are out there and they're out there permanently. This is a person's face. This is a person's voice. This is that person's emotions coming across about their desire for peace. And, I feel that collectively, when you bring those together, I think it's an incredibly powerful message that's going out there. And it doesn't have to be the person themselves on the camera, on the video. It can be a collection of photographs with a soundtrack. It could be, as you said, a bit of video of some part of the natural environment, but their energy of intention is in that video. And these are out there on a permanent basis on the net at the moment. And as you can take the URL, you can take the embed code, and that collection of little videos is no longer just in one place. It's over on another website, and it's multiplying, and the numbers are just going to keep building behind that. And, I think it's also going to start making a lot of people realize that we're actually all the same. These people that we might think of as enemies in some far off country that we don't understand, well, they want peace too. And look, here's their videos, Yeah,
it'd be great to get the more and more people international.
Absolutely.
Involvement would be great, because then you get 100% different perspectives, but all same perspective all in a strange way.
Yeah, it is.
Even different languages and, all that. I don't think we've had very many submitted in actual different languages. Most of them
they're all pretty much in English so far. Yeah. Yeah. But, there is a very, very clear message coming through these videos that, it doesn't matter where we are in the world. It doesn't matter about our gender or our age or our culture or our background in any way. We all want peace. There's so, and collectively, this is quite astonishing to see. This is these people from all around the globe coming together and all saying exactly the same thing. We just want peace,
I know we've talked a bit about how great it would be to have school children, for example, be able to be part of it, or how to expand this even further.
There is a facility on the blog at the moment. The project is running on a blog right now before it moves over to a website. But on that blog, there is a little, it's a bit of talk box software where you just switch on your webcam, record your peace message, hit send, and it's done. So it is very much about people interacting with the project and submitting stuff for it. So this is, the whole project is about people becoming engaged with it and doing something. Right at the very start, as the ideas started tumbling in for this project, one of the things that I did see immediately that I wanted to do with this project was to get it into exhibition spaces, to get it into art galleries, and get the people that go to exhibitions to actually engage with this, not just to walk past and look at this thing, that whatever it was going to be, but to actually engage with it in the gallery. So I'm thinking about having a facility within an exhibition space where people can record their 12 seconds for piece video there and then, and it becomes a part of the artwork immediately and is exhibited along with all the other videos in that gallery space.
So that people that don't have any video editing experience, for example, when I did mine, I did edit 3 or 4 different shots together.
Yeah.
But other people don't have to have that. They can have a video of themselves speaking. They can take a video of, whatever it is that they love, and not have to worry about actually having actual video software or the ability to edit video, because it doesn't matter. It's just 12 seconds of a message to get across.
Yeah, that does. I mean, that puts people off. It does scare people, because they think, well, I just don't know how to do this. I don't know how to make a video. And really, there's nothing to be afraid of with this. That if they've got a webcam, all they've got to do is just sit in front of that little screen on the blog, make their video, or hold their cat up or whatever it is, and then just hit send. Or if they've got a camera, maybe, they take videos of their kids or their family or whatever, just make a little video. And even if it's longer than 12 seconds, they can send it in and I'll cut it down to 12 seconds.
Right. I know that you currently live out of the UK in an area where you probably get a lot of time to actually, work in the art community due to your, due to what you do as far as a teaching students art, correct? Yeah. But you also seem to have a very strong spiritual side, which I think is evidenced in your Reiki. Yeah. Could you give us a little bit of an introduction to your Reiki background? And
this is a really interesting and still unfolding part of my life, really. I'd always had an interest in metaphysical things, really, and I got that from my father. He used to read an awful lot of books on hypnosis and healing and UFOs and anything a bit out there, not of the norm. So I started picking that up from him a little bit. But in my 20s, I guess, I started to realize that there was just, there was something more out there than just the normal everyday physicality of the world. And I started to look back at my childhood and various things that had happened or were natural to me, like seeing auras, for instance. I've always been able to see auras. And I never gave it a second thought. And it was during my 20s when I started to read around such subjects that I started to realize that for most people, that's actually quite a special skill. Most people can't do that. And that sort of threw me a little bit because it was just part of my everyday. And I started to explore all manner of subjects around this, this label spirituality. And I looked at quite deeply into the Kabbalah and Paganism and Buddhism. And, my initial, I guess, my starting point on my personal journey was actually making a commitment at that stage to exploring paganism. I was actually living in the West Country at the time, and I did a lot of training in that sort of area to begin with. And then my mother was ill. My mother had cancer, and the doctors said she's got a few weeks to live. And I said, no way, forget it. You don't know everything. If one person on this planet can be cured of cancer, that means cancer is not incurable. And I knew that there are people, I know there are people who've managed to cure themselves of cancer, or other people have been able to cure themselves of cancer. I thought, okay, there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way. I'm not accepting this. I'm not accepting that my mother's just going to be dead in a few weeks and that's it, end of. So I started exploring all sorts of different avenues. I was looking at, hands-on healing, using crystals, meditation, visualization, aromatherapy, anything. I didn't care what it was. If it could save my mother, I was going to give it a shot. And we managed to put together a program. Myself and my father, we worked on putting together a program because there was actually nobody out there that could give me the answer. So we built our own program around little bits of information that we took from all sorts of sources. And my mother worked with this system that we were developing, and she actually lived for another 9 months. And although she died at the end of that period, she didn't die of cancer. The cancer had gone. We fixed that. She actually ultimately died of, just not being able to eat anymore because it was a throat cancer that she had. And for me, well, I'll tell you a little story around that point, actually. When the day she died, I was on my way to a concert that my wife at the time was singing in. And it was in a church. And I remember sitting there with my father-in-law, listening to these timpani drums, this death march going on. And, suddenly something just sort of clicked and time seemed to just freeze. And I have a very clear memory of something. Now, I'm going to say the word angel. I'm not, I don't subscribe to Christianity really in any sense, but, this was an angel coming straight at me through the walls of the church. And this angel sat next to me, kissed me on the cheek, and I just went into a flat out panic at that point. And I ran out of the church, got into my father-in-law's car, got to my mother, and I just sat there and held her hand in the last few seconds as she died. And she'd called me. I know she'd called me at that point, and she was waiting until I got to her. And that for me was a pivotal moment. It was a critical point in my journey, I guess, because my mother's death, I personally needed to give that some meaning for me. I needed to feel that she hadn't died for no reason and that something positive for me was going to come out of this. And having done all of this exploration around various alternative therapies and different ways of healing, this seemed to me to be a direction that I wanted to pursue a bit further. And then I came across an article on this thing called Reiki that I'd never heard of. It was just a 1-page article. And I thought, well, this sounds fantastic. I want to find out a bit more about this. And, I just skimmed through that magazine, found all the addresses and phone numbers of everybody that was teaching a Reiki class in that one magazine, contacted them all. And, from that range of information, just picked out a class to go and attend. And I went up to Newcastle to train with my Reiki masters. And that's really how I got into Reiki. So it was, but it's a long journey. And this is still part of the spiritual journey that's still going on, really.
For people that aren't really familiar with Reiki, can you give us kind of a short description or?
There is an awful lot of misunderstanding and misinformation out there about Reiki. Reiki at its core is a personal spiritual development system. It's generally regarded by most people as a hands-on therapy, a hands-on healing system, but that's not what it is at all. It's a personal spiritual development system. Its fundamental purpose is about you working on yourself with meditation. This is the core of the system. This is what it was developed for. It's about, and again, this sort of fits in really nicely with the Peace Project in a sense. It's about you becoming a better person, you becoming peaceful, you developing your sense of compassion. And actually a byproduct of the system, because it's an energy system, is that you can use it in a healing context. So you can work on people with Reiki in a therapeutic way. But that's not what it's about. It's about you working on yourself.
Now, it's an ancient system, isn't it?
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, the system of Reiki was developed by a guy called Mikao Usui. No one's exactly clear of the date, but it was around sort of 1904-5, something like that, where he was starting to put this system together. But he pulled on a lot of different traditions, and which are very ancient. He was a Tendai Buddhist, so he was pulling on the Tendai Buddhist tradition to a degree, but he was also a martial artist, and he was pulling on his knowledge of working with energy in that context. He drew on Shintoism. He also drew on, projection healing that is as part of out of Qigong. You know, Qigong informed his healing system as well. He also drew on a system called the Buddho. Now, the Buddho is critical in many ways because it is the system from which the core of the Reiki system is drawn. It's a Buddhist system, and within Reiki, we use symbols at the 2nd degree and the 3rd degree, and we use them in the attunement process to initiate, new people into the Reiki system. This is based around symbols. Those symbols have their origins within the Buddho system. That Buddho system is still available. It is taught within the tradition that I teach, but it is not taught within other traditions. And it is a critical part of the whole Reiki experience in a sense, because this is where the core of, Reiki being a personal spiritual development system is. That's where it lies. It's in the meditations that come out of the Buddho system. And the symbols that are a part of the Buddho system are core to the secular Reiki system as well.
Now, I know that that a lot of that is private teachings, so I'm not going to ask you about the symbols, just so that everyone is aware of that it's something that you only get initiated to depending on, I guess, how you pass or qualify for a level. But there seems to be a lot of, I'd say, either divergence or not. There seem to be Reiki practitioners without a solid foundation that seem to be coming from a different position than what you're explaining to me. Because I've always had a very negative view of it. And through my conversations with you this last couple of days, have shifted the way I view it because you've brought a more in-depth understanding to me. But what can you say about what seems to be a lot of people out there practicing that really maybe don't know what they're doing or are doing something else?
I think this is, it's just symptomatic of the West, really. I mean, we do this over and over again to ancient systems that, we eventually discover in other countries. We bring them over to the West and we completely trash them and reduce them to their, the shallowest. We take out everything that had meaning and turn it into some sort of peripheral, it's like a gloss, really. We take all its substance out, really. And we've done this with Reiki. There's lineage is very important in the Reiki system, and you don't hear an awful lot of people talking about their lineage within Reiki now. And I can understand where they come from when they say, lineage, that's not that important. Why is this important? Who cares what the line of teachers is? And in a sense, I get where they're coming from. But actually, what they fail to realize is that lineage is actually a vessel. It's the vessel that contains the teachings. And that lineage passes on that grouping, that collection of teachings from one generation to another. And it's important to know your lineage, to know the vessel that contains those teachings. Because if you don't have that vessel, then anything can get in, anything can fall out, and you end up with something that actually isn't worth passing on. And this has happened an awful lot in recent times, over the last 10 years or so. I mean, a lot of people, they haven't a clue what their lineage is. No idea. And Reiki has been, it's being reduced to you can go and have a manicure and a Reiki treatment. It's almost like part of that whole, beauty salon type thing now in a lot of areas. And the whole spiritual aspect of Reiki seems to have been stripped away.
It's been commercialized.
It's become commercialized, yeah. And which is unfortunate, but within Reiki, it is inherently open to such abuse. Because of the attunement process, which is the core of the system. There's a lot of people now talking about getting your Reiki attunements over the internet or via the phone, or we'll do it over, do it yourself, read the book and you can attune yourself. This is all rubbish. You can't attune yourself to Reiki. You can't do it over the internet. You can't read a book and attune. You have to attend a class with a Reiki master. And the reason for that, if the attunements are done properly, there is a particular part of that process where physical pressure needs to be put on certain points on the student. And if you don't do that, you can't make sure that attunement stays and that they will forever be able to practice Reiki. It needs that physical contact. So there's a lot of people out there that have done these self-attunements, internet attunements, reading a book type attunements. None of these people are doing Reiki because they need a physical contact with the Reiki master. Now, because of that, it is obviously open to extreme abuse because, let's say I'm the only Reiki master and you want to come and be trained in Reiki. I can charge you whatever I like because there's no other way for you to get it. And this is what is happening. There's a lot of Reiki masters that have been out there saying, well, okay, you want Reiki, you can't get it unless you come to me, and I'm going to charge you, $5,000, $10,000, whatever I want. So this is, it's a fantastic way of making a huge amount of money, so it has been open to a lot of abuse, unfortunately. And this is in some senses the downfall of the system. It's been abused enormously, but it's also been reduced to almost nothing in some quarters as well. So, and this for me is why it's important to stick with this concept of lineage and make sure that these teachings are passed on purely and with integrity. People aren't charged a huge amount and they get the teachings, and it's actually critical to make sure that their training is up to the standard. I won't let somebody go on to a new level of Reiki training unless I'm pretty convinced that actually they're capable of it. I'm not interested that they've got the cash to pay for it. They need to be at a personal level where, they're actually able to work with that energy and pass it on themselves with integrity.
I noticed that, lineage is very important in both yoga and martial arts traditions. So it is actually in many. An Asian influence, the idea of lineage in a sense.
Yeah.
I know that both yoga and martial arts really do take on his hands-on presence of a teacher.
Yeah.
To be in the vicinity.
Yeah.
To be correctly taught. Although you can learn yoga postures from a book and you can learn different martial arts postures from a book, it is the teacher that actually communicates something more than the posture or more than the teaching. There's something else that happens in that transmission of information.
Yeah.
Like you said, the vessel, that's a very good way to put it, actually. Because with the West taking yoga, for example, and martial arts, they have diluted it as well and changed it to become a gym thing or an exercise thing when it's really it's a lot more than that.
Absolutely.
And it affects us on a much more subtle level if we correctly follow the teachings of yoga instead of sort of a diluted form of it.
Yeah.
I'm curious, in your system, if let's say someone decided they wanted to become a practitioner, how long would it take for them to do that?
From the very start, they would come and do the first degree in Reiki. I would teach them that over 2 days and then expect them to go away for a minimum of 3 months to do further self-practice. At that point, they could then apply to do the second degree. But I'd want to be, I'd want to be sure that they were ready for it, and that they got a level of integrity that suggested to me that they were going to pass on the system. in the way that it should be passed on, and they're not going to water it down and add other things into it. And, like tarot cards and crystals and angels and that whole thing, which is, nothing to do with Reiki, but there's a lot of people putting this into their practice now. And at that point, the second degree would also be another 2 days training and then another period of self-practice beyond that. The master's level, very few people go on to take the masters, which is why this lineage is still quite small. I mean, I personally, for instance, took 2 years to train as a Reiki master. It wasn't, 1 day or a couple of days or something. And I've only in the last 10 years, I've taught one person to that level. Not because I don't want to teach anybody. I'm quite happy to teach people, but there's so few people out there that are willing to put that sort of effort in to make that sort of level of commitment where they're going to be working for maybe a year or two before they're actually qualified to pass on the tradition themselves. We're in an instant culture. Everybody wants everything immediately, and they want it cheap and they want it fast. And so this tradition doesn't work like that, And I have had students that I've taken to the second degree who then want to go on to the master's level. They're not ready for it, and I'm not prepared to give them it until they are ready for it. And they've just gone off and, done a 2-day course with somebody else to get the master's training. And that's fine, if that's what they want to do. So, beginning to end, you're looking at maybe a couple of years or so to become a Reiki master within this tradition.
That is depending on it if you actually follow the practice correctly.
Yeah, sure.
And
absolutely.
if you determine that they're...
Yeah.
So you have fairly strict standards.
Yeah, the standards have to be strict because, I don't want to see this tradition getting trashed in the same way that so many other traditions have got trashed. This is the energy in this tradition is astonishing. It's incredibly powerful. And I've had people that have trained within other traditions come to me and say, I can't believe the intensity of that energy. I've never felt it that strong before. And if we start deviating from the teachings and the way the tradition has been transmitted to any great extent, that energy starts to diminish. Its strength is in the purity of the teachings and the transmission of that energy.
I noticed you're very perceptive of not only auric fields, but people in general and areas. You seem to be very perceptive. You've written a book about Reiki, correct?
Yeah.
Is that the book that you were talking about earlier when you said?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. What's the name of the book and what does it cover? And could you tell us the story of how you got published as well?
Yeah, it's called Reiki Jinkei-Do, The Way of Compassion and Wisdom. It's an interesting story how that book came about, actually, because I was doing my own second degree training with my Reiki masters, Gordon and Dorothy, up in Newcastle. And I remember saying to Dorothy at one point during the class, we just took a coffee break, and I said, Dorothy, I don't understand why it is that nobody's ever written a book on this tradition. Why is it not been done? These teachings are amazing. It's not in print. And she said, well, the lineage head, Ranga, is actually in the process of writing a book. And I'd sort of got in the back of my mind at that point, no one's done this book. I'm going to do it. And then she said, no, Ranga's doing it. I thought, oh, right, forget it. There's no point in me doing this. If the lineage head is going to write a book, he clearly knows a lot more than I do. So I put that whole idea of writing the lineage book, on the back burner. And the years went by, and by 2005, this is, 8 or 9 years later, still no book from Ranga, no book on the lineage teachings at all. And I thought, I'm just going to do it. I don't care if he's writing a book, I'm going to write it. And I contacted Gordon and Dorothy and I said, look, I'm going to write this book. Do you mind if I pass this material by you, so you can just read it through as I write it and just make sure I haven't got, that everything's okay and I haven't got misinformation in there. And I contacted Ranga as well, and he was okay about me writing a book on the lineage. In fact, he contributed the foreword to the book ultimately. So I went ahead and wrote that book. And essentially, it's just an outline of the teachings on all three levels, how the history of Reiki, what Reiki is, what it does, what it can be used for, what it can't be used for, shining a light on this, on what seems to be a forgotten aspect of the Reiki system. As I said earlier, it's a personal spiritual development system. And I wanted to emphasize that centrally in the book. And so it covers all of the teachings, not in any depth, but it just gives a flavour of what the lineage is about and what to expect in a class, etc. And I'd written maybe 2 or 3 chapters, and I got the rest of the book in outline at that point. And I didn't know how to get a book published. I'd never written a book in my life before. And I thought, well, how do you do this? I've got this book that I'm writing. How do I actually get this on a shelf? How does that happen? And I didn't know whether I was supposed to ring, find some publishers' phone numbers and just call them, or write to them with a formal letter, or email them, or, how does this work? And okay, Reiki's got to do this for me. So I just scanned with my hand all of the books on Reiki that I had on my bookshelf, stopped at one book, pulled it out, that publisher. And so I got the first draft of the first book that I've ever written sitting there on my computer. And I sent that off to the first publisher, that publisher that I pulled off the shelf, and he bought it within 24 hours. That's how you get published.
That sounds like fairly powerful energy, actually.
It was immensely powerful energy. The Reiki showed me which publisher to go to. I mean,
I'm curious. That makes me curious about something. When you say Reiki showed me, how can that be? What is Reiki that can show you?
Yeah. What is it? Reiki means universal life force energy, but, forget that. Reiki is love. That's what it is. It depends how you see this depends on your own personal belief system. You can call this the energy of enlightenment. You can call this a direct expression of God. You can call it love. You can call it whatever you like, but this is the ultimate energy. This is what everything is made of.
That's been great, Steve. Thank you. Is there anything that you'd like to put out there for the 12 for anybody who's listening to this about 12 seconds for peace as we wrap up?
Yeah, I'd just like to encourage anybody and everybody just to contribute to this project. Just make a 12-second video. It ain't going to take you long. It's not complicated. Just get in front of your webcam, say something pro-peace. It needs, it's got to come from your heart. It's, say something with feeling, but put your intention for peace in the world onto a little video and just send it into the project, and I'll upload it.
How can they find you? What's your URL?
They can go to the blog, which is www.12secondsforpeace. That's, number 12, number 4, .blogspot.com. Or they can just email it to 12secondsforpeace@gmail.com.
Right. Great. Thank you.
No problem. Good to talk to you.
I know. One other thing. Where can they buy your book if they wanted to buy your book?
You can get it in all main high street bookshops, or you can get it on Amazon. Barnes and Noble have got it. Waterstones, you can get it. All the main book outlets, you can get it.
Okay. So could you give us the title again?
Yeah, it's Reiki Jinkei-do, The Way of Compassion and Wisdom.
By Steve Gooch.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Steve.
No problem.